The scream tore through the mountain pass so suddenly that Taelen Gray Hawk nearly loosed his rifle into the white sky. Snow came down sideways. Vicious and blinding, the kind of storm that erased trails. Time and men all the same. Pines bent and groaned under the weight of ice, their branches snapping like bones. The world beyond a few paces dissolved into swirling white. And even Taelen, who had crossed battlefields and blizzards alike, felt. The cold pressed its teeth into him. He turned his horse sharply, scanning the slope below the narrow pass. Another sound followed, not a scream this time. A broken gasp, human, desperate. Taelen slid from the saddle, boots plunging knee-deep into powder. His long black hair, braided with bone and silver beads, slapped against his back as the wind tore at his coat. The heavy wool garment, dark, lined with hand-stitched Apache symbols, snapped open, revealing leather, scars, and memories he never spoke of. "Hold on," he muttered. Not knowing to whom, he moved downhill toward the sound, each step treacherous. Beneath the fresh snow lay ice as slick as glass. The land here was dangerous even in summer. In winter it killed without mercy. Then he saw her. She stumbled across a frozen ravine, feet bare and blue against the ice, her body shaking violently as she fought to stay upright. A white dress clung to her like a second skin, once fine silk, now torn, soaked, and stiff with frost. Lace sleeves were shredded. Blood streaked one ankle, already darkening as the cold claimed it. A bride in the middle of nowhere in a storm meant to kill. Talen's chest tightened. "Hey!" he shouted, voice ripped apart by the wind. She turned at the sound, eyes wild, unfocused. For a heartbeat, she simply stared at him, this tall man wrapped in a tribal coat, face sharp with winter, eyes dark as wet stone. Fear crossed her face. "No," she whispered. "Not you." Her foot slipped. Taelen dropped his rifle without thinking and lunged forward. His hands caught her shoulders just as her body tipped toward the ravine. Ice cracked beneath them. For a terrifying moment, they both slid. Then Taelen dug his heels in and hauled her back. She weighed almost nothing. Her body was burning cold, shaking so hard her teeth rattled audibly. Her fingers clawed weakly at his coat as if afraid he might vanish. "It's all right," he said, low and firm. "You're not falling." Her eyes fluttered, fixed on his face, then rolled back. She went limp. Taelen cursed softly and gathered her up, bridal silk and fur mixing, blood staining his sleeve. The storm howled around them, impatient, angry at being denied its prize. By the time he reached the cabin, night had swallowed the mountains. The structure was barely visible unless you knew where to look, built into a rock face, half hidden by pine and snowdrift. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, a thin promise of warmth. Taelen kicked the door shut behind him and laid the woman on the narrow bed near the fire. He stripped off his coat, wrapped her in furs, and stoked the flames until the small room glowed amber against the cold pressing in from all sides. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue. He rubbed her arms briskly, murmuring Apache words his mother once used to call souls back into bodies. He poured warm water between her lips, careful not to choke her. Minutes stretched. Then she gasped. Her body jerked violently, eyes snapping open as she sucked in air like a drowning swimmer. Panic flared instantly. She tried to scramble away, tangled in furs. "Easy," Taelen said, raising his hands. "You're safe." She froze, chest heaving, eyes darting around the cabin, the stone walls, the fire, the rifle leaning against the table. Then her gaze landed on him. Recognition flared there. Not comfort. Something sharper. "Where am I?" she demanded, voice hoarse. "High country," he answered. "North of Elk Ridge." Her jaw tightened. "He'll come." Taelen studied her face carefully now. She was around 30. He guessed lines of resilience etched near her eyes, hands rougher than expected for a woman in silk. This was not someone made fragile by circumstance. Who? He asked. She hesitated. My husband. The word fell heavy between them. Taelen turned back to the fire, letting the silence stretch. He had learned long ago that people filled quiet with truth. I'm Taelen Greyhawk, he said at last. This is my land. Her eyes flicked back to him, lingering on the tribal jewelry at his throat, the faint markings along his jaw. I didn't know where else to go, she said softly. I was running. What's your name? Another pause. Too long. Maeve, she said. Maeve called her. The name slid out smoothly. Too smoothly. Before Taelen could respond, the cabin door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying snow and the scent of pine. Papa? Taelen turned sharply. His daughter stood in the doorway, small but steady, wrapped in a fox fur cloak nearly as old as she was. Snow dusted her dark hair. Her eyes, his eyes, lifted toward the bed. She froze, her face drained of color. The fire cracked loudly. Kiona took one slow step forward. I know her, she said. Maeve sat bolt upright, breath catching in her throat. Taelen single quotes as heart slammed painfully against his ribs. What do you mean? He asked. Kiona's gaze never left the woman. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. She was barefoot in the snow, Kiona whispered. The night Mama died. The woman's face crumpled. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The silence that followed Kiona's words felt heavier than the storm, pressing against the cabin walls. Eleanor's breath came in short, shallow bursts. Her hands gripped the furs as if they were the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. Firelight flickered across her face, revealing fear layered with something older, guilt, perhaps, or grief that had never found a place to rest. I didn't know there was a child, Eleanor said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. I swear it. I thought I was alone. Kiona didn't answer. She stood rigid, eyes fixed on Eleanor with a mix of confusion and a terrible kind of certainty. Children recognized truth differently than adults did. They felt it before they understood it. Taelen stepped between them, his broad frame blocking Kiona's view. He rested a hand on his daughter's shoulder, grounding her. You should sleep, he said gently. The storm isn't done with us yet. Kiona hesitated, then nodded. She glanced once more at Eleanor before turning toward the small sleeping alcove carved into the stone wall. As she disappeared behind the fur curtain, Taelen felt the weight of her unasked questions settle squarely on his chest. When they were alone again, Eleanor sagged, covering her face with both hands. I never meant to bring this to your door, she said. If I had known. You knew enough, Taelen replied, not unkindly. You ran. Her shoulders shook. Because staying meant becoming something I couldn't live with. Taelen fed another log into the fire. The flame snapped, throwing shadows across the cabin walls like restless spirits. Tell me what really happened, he said. Not the smooth version. Eleanor lowered her hands. Her eyes glistened, reflecting fire and memory alike. My name is Eleanor Pike, she said. I was a school teacher in Silver Bend. I taught children to read, to write their names straight, to imagine a future that didn't end in dust and debt. That's where I met Nathaniel Calder. Talen's jaw tightened slightly at the name. He came to town with money and plans, Eleanor continued. Rail lines, contracts, speeches about progress. Everyone adored him. I didn't at first. But he knew how to wear charm like armor. When he asked me to marry him, I thought I was choosing safety. She laughed bitterly. I was choosing a cage. Taelen said nothing. The fire spoke for him. After we married, I began seeing documents on his desk, Eleanor said. Land deeds. Forced removals. Names crossed out. Families erased with ink. One night I followed him. That's when I saw her. Taelen's hand stilled. She stood alone in the snow, refusing to leave her home. Eleanor said softly, "Your wife. She had your daughter's eyes." He ordered his men to scare her. They went too far. Her voice broke. I confronted him. Told him I would go to the authorities, to the newspapers. He laughed. Locked me in the house. Said the world belonged to men who knew how to take it. The storm outside slammed against the cabin, as if punctuating her words. I escaped during a winter gathering, Eleanor went on. Stole a coat. A horse. I ran until my legs gave out. I thought the mountains would hide me. They did, Taelen said. For a time. Eleanor nodded. I fell near a creek. I couldn't feel my feet. I remember thinking I was already dead. Then hands pulled me into the trees. She wrapped me in her shawl, hid me from men with guns. Tears spilled freely now. She saved my life, Eleanor whispered. And paid for it. Taelen turned away, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. The memory of that night, of waiting, of searching, of finding nothing but blood-stained snow rose like bile in his throat. When I healed enough to walk, Eleanor continued, I tried to return. But Calder found me first. He said he'd burn every settlement between the mountains and the river if I didn't come back. I believed him. You married him again? Taelen said. I survived him, Eleanor corrected quietly. For as long as I could. Taelen faced her again, his eyes dark with something like restrained fury. And now? And now he's hunting me, she said. Because this time I took something with me. She reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a small, oil-wrapped packet. Papers, ledgers, proof, she said. Names, dates, payments. Enough to destroy him if it ever reaches the right hands. Taelen exhaled slowly. That was when the sound reached them. Faint. Rhythmic hooves. Eleanor stiffened instantly. He's close. Taelen moved to the narrow window carved into the stone. He brushed away frost and peered out. Tracks cut through the fresh snow below the ridge. Multiple riders. Heavy horses. They're searching, he said. Not yet certain. Eleanor stood, swaying slightly, then steadied herself. I won't let this fall on you or your daughter. You already did, Taelen replied. But that doesn't mean we run. The hooves faded into the distance, but the threat lingered like a drawn blade. Night deepened. Later, when Eleanor slept fitfully by the fire, Taelen sat awake, sharpening his knife. Each stroke against the stone was measured, deliberate. He thought of Kiona's small voice. Of footprints in the snow that never left his memory. At dawn, Kiona emerged quietly. They're coming, she said. Taelen looked at her, surprised. How do you know? I can feel it, she answered simply. Taelen rested a hand on her head. Then we prepare. By midday, smoke rose faintly from the valley below. Eleanor woke to the smell of it and the sound of Taelen loading his rifle. They've reached the lower trail, he said. Nathaniel will come himself. Eleanor swallowed hard. He won't stop. Taelen met her gaze, steady and unyielding. Neither will we. Far below. Nathaniel Calder reined in his horse and smiled as he studied the mountains ahead. He had always enjoyed the hunt. The first gunshot echoed through the valley like a crack in the sky. Snow burst from a pine, trunk a few feet from Taelen's shoulder. He didn't flinch. He had already moved. Already pulled Eleanor and Kiona down behind the rock shelf as bullets hissed through the air where they had been standing moments before. They're closer than I thought, Eleanor whispered, her breath fogging. They followed smoke, Taelen replied. My mistake. Kiona crouched between them, eyes wide but dry. She held the small knife Taelen had given her, knuckles white around the handle. Stay here, Taelen said to her. "No matter what you hear." "I won't move," she promised. Taelen squeezed her shoulder once and rose. Vanishing into the trees like a shadow pulled loose from the mountain, Nathaniel Calder rode at the front of his men, his horse stamping impatiently as snow drifted down in lazy flakes that belied the violence about to come. He lifted a gloved hand, signaling his men to spread. "She's here," he said calmly. "I can smell fear." One of the men laughed nervously. Another spat into the snow. Taelen circled them from above, using the narrow ridges and snow-packed boulders to his advantage. He waited. He always waited. A rifle cracked. One of Calder's men screamed and fell, blood blooming bright against white. Panic rippled through the group. "Find him!" Calder barked. "He's just one man." But Taelen was never just one man. He was memory and mountain, grief sharpened into purpose. He struck again. Silent as falling ash. Eleanor watched from cover, her heart hammering as she raised her own rifle. She had never killed a man, but she had watched enough cruelty to know when restraint became complicity. A rider charged toward the cabin path. She fired. The man tumbled from his saddle, rolling into the snow. Eleanor's hand shook violently, but she did not look away. "I won't run," she murmured to herself. Nathaniel saw her then. His eyes locked onto Eleanor's form against the rock, fury flashing across his face. "There you are," he said softly. "You always did like dramatic exits." He dismounted, stepping forward deliberately, hands open to show false calm. "You don't belong here," he called. "You belong with me." Eleanor stood, rifle trained on his chest. "I belong to myself," she said. Calder laughed. "You always did confuse stubbornness with strength." A shout rang out from above. Calder's shoulder jerked as blood seeped through his coat. He staggered but stayed on his feet, teeth clenched. "You see?" he shouted hoarsely. "He's a savage, hiding like an animal." Taelen stepped into view then, rifle steady, long coat whipping in the wind. "This land remembers us," Taelen said. "It does not remember you." Calder sneered. "I made this land valuable. You made it bleed." Gunfire erupted again. The valley filled with noise, shouts, shots, the sharp scream of a wounded horse. Snow turned to chaos beneath boots and hooves. Taelen moved relentlessly, driving Calder's men back toward the ravine. He fought with the precision of someone who had already lost everything worth losing. Below, Kiona heard the shots and pressed her back against the stone, whispering the words her mother had once taught her. She did not cry. She listened. Eleanor advanced carefully, covering Taelen's flank. She saw one of Calder's men raise a pistol toward Taelen's back. She fired without hesitation. The man dropped. Taelen glanced at her once, acknowledgment flashing between them like a shared vow. Calder retreated toward the edge of the ravine, blood staining his sleeve. He slipped, caught himself, then turned, rage burning through the pain. "You think killing me ends this?" He spat. "Men like me don't die so easily." Taelen approached slowly. "No," he said. "Men like you are already dead. You just haven't noticed." Calder reached for his gun. A shot rang out. Calder froze, eyes wide in disbelief, then crumpled to his knees. Blood soaked into the snow beneath him. Eleanor stood behind him, rifle smoking, tears streaming down her face. "It ends here," she said. Calder laughed weakly. "You'll hang for this." "No," Eleanor replied. "You will." Taelen stepped forward, placing himself between Calder and Eleanor. "This is not her burden," he said. Calder looked up at Taelen, hatred giving way to fear for the first time. "You won't do it," he said. "You're better than me." Taelen raised his rifle. "I am," he said quietly. "That's why I will." The shot echoed across the valley, rolling through the mountains like thunder. Silence followed. Broken only by wind and the distant cry of a hawk, Taelen stood still for a long moment, then lowered his weapon. Eleanor sank to her knees, the weight of everything crashing down on her at once. It was over. For now, Taelen turned back toward the cabin, already searching the rocks for movement, for danger. "Kiona," he called. She emerged cautiously, eyes scanning the snow. "I'm here," she said. Taelen knelt and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Eleanor watched them, tears freezing on her lashes, and realized something had shifted inside her. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt like a threat, but the mountains were still watching, and winter was not done with them yet. The mountain was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, as if it were holding its breath after years of shouting. Snow still covered the ground where Nathaniel had fallen, but the storm clouds had broken apart, leaving a pale winter sun that reflected off the valley like 1,000 scattered mirrors. Eleanor stood alone at the edge of the ravine, staring at the place where blood had darkened the snow only hours before. The wind moved gently now, almost respectfully, lifting the hem of her borrowed coat. She expected to feel relief. Instead, her hands trembled. Taelen approached without sound, his boots leaving careful impressions behind him. He stopped a few steps away, giving her space. He understood that some moments were not meant to be filled with words. "It's finished," Eleanor said finally, though her voice lacked certainty. Taelen nodded. "For him?" She closed her eyes. Images flickered behind them. Nathaniel's smile, his hand tightening on her wrist, the locked doors, the ink-stained papers that had sealed so many fates. She had imagined this moment countless times, always believing it would feel like freedom. It felt more like standing on unfamiliar ground. "I don't know who I am without running," she admitted. Taelen considered that. "Then stay," he said simply. "Long enough to remember." They returned to the cabin together. Kiona was inside, kneeling by the fire, carefully feeding it small sticks the way her mother once had. She looked up when they entered, her eyes searching their faces. "Is he gone?" she asked. "Yes," Taelen said. Kiona studied Eleanor for a long moment, then rose and walked toward her. Eleanor tensed instinctively, unsure what to expect. Kiona stopped just short of touching her. "You won't scream anymore," the girl said, not as a question. Eleanor's throat tightened. "No." Kiona nodded once, satisfied, and returned to the fire. That night, exhaustion claimed them all. Eleanor slept deeply for the first time in years, dreamless and still. Taelen sat awake until dawn, listening to the quiet, rifle within reach. Habits slow to release their grip. Morning came soft and pale. Sunlight spilled through the narrow window, illuminating drifting motes of dust and ash. Eleanor woke to the sound of chopping outside. She stepped out to find Taelen splitting wood, his movements steady, controlled. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, indifferent and eternal. "What happens now?" she asked. Taelen rested the axe against the stump. "The world will keep turning," he said. "Men will come asking questions. They'll want answers," Eleanor said. "And proof." She retrieved the oil-wrapped papers from her satchel and handed them to him. Taelen took them carefully, as if they carried weight beyond ink. "These will travel," he said. "To people who listen. And you?" Eleanor asked. "I will stay," he replied. "This is home." Days passed. Snow melted slowly, revealing dark earth beneath. Eleanor helped where she could, mending, cooking, teaching Kiona letters by firelight. The girl watched her closely at first, wary as a half-tamed fox. But children knew when walls were meant to fall. One evening, as Eleanor traced letters in the dirt, Kiona asked, "Why were you barefoot?" Eleanor paused. "Because I thought if I left everything behind, he couldn't follow." Kiona considered this. "Did it work?" Eleanor smiled sadly. Not at first, but you came back, Kiona said. Yes. That seemed to satisfy her. Riders arrived a week later, their approach announced by the distant rhythm of hooves. Eleanor stiffened, instinct flaring. Taelen met them at the ridge, rifle slung but ready. They were not Nathaniel's men. These riders carried papers, not guns raised in anger. News traveled slowly in winter, but truth, once loosed, moved with surprising speed. Nathaniel Calder's dealings had unraveled quickly once Eleanor's documents reached the right hands. His partners turned on one another. His name became poisoned. One of the riders removed his hat. We're here to take statements, he said, and to confirm his death. Taelen nodded. You may see the place. Eleanor watched from the cabin as they rode away again, their figures shrinking into the valley. A strange calm settled over her chest. Weeks turned into months. Spring crept into the high country cautiously, painting the edges of the snow with green. Eleanor's presence no longer felt temporary. She learned the mountain's moods, the way Taelen read clouds and wind, the way Kiona laughed more freely now. One morning, Eleanor stood at the creek where Taelen's wife had died. The water rushed clear and cold, fed by melting snow. She knelt and placed a small bundle of wildflowers on the bank. I never knew your name, she whispered, but I carry what you gave me. The wind stirred the water as if in answer. Later that day, Eleanor burned the remains of her wedding dress. Silk curled and blackened, lace turned to ash. She scattered it into the creek and watched it disappear. When she turned back, Taelen was there. You don't have to leave, he said. I know, Eleanor replied, but I need to choose where I stand. She took a breath. I want to help rebuild the school in Silver Bend, teach again. Tell the truth. Taelen nodded slowly. The mountain will still be here. Kiona approached then, holding something in her hands, a small beaded bracelet, worn smooth with age. It was Mama's, she said, offering it to Eleanor. You should have it. Eleanor knelt, tears spilling freely now. Thank you, she whispered. When summer came, Eleanor rode down from the mountains, not as a fugitive, but as a woman with purpose. She returned often, bringing books, stories, news of a world slowly changing. The mountains watched, as they always had, and this time, when Eleanor walked across the snow, she wore boots and left no fear behind.